a moment ago celebrating Pastor Sharon's 1-year anniversary, apparently right around this time, coming to preach here for the first time. But it's actually an anniversary for me too, because I was here around this time, maybe it was just the weekend before Epiphany last year, and I preached my very first sermon ever.
Oh, wow.
You have been an intimate part of my journey, and I was just ordained in November, so this is a very special. And so I couldn't resist preaching again on the Magi, since that was the text I used last year. I know it's coming full circle. It's a little self-indulgent for me to want to preach on the same thing again. I hope you can forgive me that little self-indulgence, but I really wanted to work with that same text as a way of kind of closing off the circle of my journey and my journey with you in some way. So I appreciate you allowing me to do that. What I'd like to take up the theme of this morning is what I'll call spiritual sovereignty. Spiritual rulership. Spiritual rulership. And I know sometimes the language of rulership and kingship and queenship and maybe even the kingdom of heaven, one of Jesus' favorite phrases, can sometimes be a little problematic for us in our queer spirituality, our queer community, because we're so sensitive to the ways in which power operates to oppress others, that we sometimes shy away from that kind of metaphor, that kind of language. And so I hope that you'll come with me in a little bit of courage, a little bit of an open heart to kind of look fresh at this metaphor. And I trust that as MCC of the Redwood Empire, you're completely averse to this kind of language. So spiritual sovereignty is what I want to take up. I want to look at each one of the 3 readings to make a point about how we are called into our spiritual sovereignty. I want to do that one step at a time. But would you first join with me in a moment of silence? Gather just for a moment. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be good and beneficial and pleasing to you, O Holy Lord. Amen. So spiritual sovereignty, what is spiritual rulership, and how are we called into our spiritual sovereignty? Well, first of all, we have to distinguish spiritual sovereignty from worldly sovereignty, worldly rulership. And I think the story of the Magi does this in a really beautiful way. We didn't read the whole story, but you might recall that the Magi are coming in to search for the Christ child, to search for the King of the Jews, actually. And they come into Jerusalem, and they're asking around, we follow the star here, we're looking for the King of the Jews. And King Herod gets wind of this and isn't too happy about it, right? And he's sort of like, well, wait, we're the King of the Jews. So he gets these prophets together, these priests, and they say, oh yeah, in the scripture it says the King of the Jews would be born in Bethlehem. So he calls the Magi into his audience and says, you know, I'd really like to pay homage to the King of the Jews too. When you find him, let me know, so I can come and bow down to this King of the Jews. Magi go off, they find Jesus in the manger, and they pay homage, they pay respects, and then they were warned in a dream to leave by another route. They don't go back to King Herod. And so to me, this is a difference between the worldly sovereignty of King Herod and the spiritual sovereignty of the baby Jesus. Christ consciousness, Christ heart, Christ mind that we are all called to participate in. Herod is manipulative, secretive, conniving. not clear on his true motives, trying, in fact, to protect and possess his throne, looking to kill, oppress, suppress, exclude any potential threat to his kingdom. So, worldly sovereignty is marked by possessiveness. Mine, not yours. Exclusiveness, not yours. Oppression, submit to me. Manipulation, secrecy, hiddenness. And spiritual sovereignty, I want to suggest, it is all the opposite of those things. It's a kind of self-existing dignity. Right? It's not possessive, it's a generosity of spirit that pours forth. Not concerned about me or mine. It's not exclusive. There's no inside, there's no outside. It's just open. Open. No division. It's not oppressive, it's not controlling, it's just a free flow of wisdom and compassion. And it's certainly not manipulative or hidden. It's transparent. It's innocent like the baby Jesus. We are called into that spiritual sovereignty. And, I think it's easy for us, especially in a church so activated by social justices, I think we all are, to go out and look for all the King Herods in the world. And to say, okay, we're going to oppose that there are many King Herods in the world.
Yeah.
And there's a plenty to find that we could go and we can testify to, we can prophesy to, we can speak truth to those forms of worldly power. But how about the King Herod in our heart? Right? How about all of those subtle ways we are hiding from somebody, hoping to kind of manipulate the circumstances of our relationships or our work settings, not really clear in stating our full intention because we want to somehow control the situation. We want it to go the way we want it to go. Yeah, not easy to hear. Yeah. And so who in your heart in this moment are you paying homage to? Who are you giving your most precious gifts to? That tyrant of the ego, mind, or to the Christ consciousness, which is also there? Innocence, that sweetness that's in the heart. Where are you bowing down and giving your most precious gifts this morning? I was just reminded of this week. I volunteered at SF General Hospital one day a week, and I saw two patients back to back, as it happens. And one of them was a gentleman who was very lively and very engaging and welcomed chaplaincy, but he was really upset. They didn't bring the food in, and they didn't bring enough food, and then I think that nurse she's not really paying attention to me the way she should. Oh, and I heard something out in the hall, and they didn't get that right. I almost went out there and set that straight, because they were doing some terrible things out there in the hallway just an hour ago. On and on and on about how he felt controlled and manipulated, and people were against him, and the nurses were really conspiring, and just was so full to me of this mindset of me and them. I didn't get my lunch, and it didn't come in time, and all of this kind of fighting with the world, because he saw the world in terms of a power struggle. He saw the world with the mindset of me and mine. Right? And there was, in contrast, just after that, I went and saw a patient who had organized her little area. She had put some stuff very neatly, and had a photo, and she was sitting on the side of her bed. She was in the long-term care rehab area, so she was able to wear a sweater over her hospital gown, and had a little jewelry on, a little makeup, and sat there in sort of a quiet dignity. Now, this doesn't mean that spiritual sovereignty has to look one way or the other. Sometimes we do need to rail in righteous anger against something, and sometimes even the quiet, dignified clearly are hiding something. But there was a presence about her that was welcome, open, soft, dignified. I felt her dignity sitting in her presence that morning. So that gives, to me, that gives a little bit of a worldly example of how this might play out. But I think we all probably in our hearts know when we're tuning into one or the other. Finding spiritual sovereignty, second point, is confusing. This is that Gospel of Thomas passage. It's a really odd passage, right? If you're searching, don't stop until you find. If you find, you become troubled. Your confusion will give way to wonder. In wonder, you'll reign over all things, and your sovereignty will be your rest. Spiritual sovereignty confuses the world. It's not the world's normal operating system, the normal paradigm. It's a bit like, I don't know if people have computers here. I have a computer that I use, a laptop, and it's a bit like the difference between the operating system underlying the software programs. Right? We tend to run software programs that are me and mine and you and yours, this kind of dual thinking. Underneath that is a unifying presence. It doesn't mean that the software program is bad. It's something that's useful, this sense of me, and I'm separate from you, and we have our rights and our responsibilities. But when we're only collapsing our whole reality to that software program, we're missing the larger unity, the peace, the love. We're missing the Christ, the God that's already here. Right? And so what we're called to do, I think, in this path is to move from identifying with the software program and move into the operating system. Would be one way of talking about it. And what this movement does is it confuses us because the dual mind doesn't get this whole bit about innocence. It doesn't get this thing about being transparent. It doesn't like that. It wants to hide and hold on and be separate so that it can control and manipulate. So when we actually find the confusion we feel is the confusion of the me program. And what it opens up to is every moment, fresh, new, it's not planned or strategized or manipulated. Innocent. In wonder, we'll find our rest. You see, when we're running this dual operating program, me, you, mine, not yours, exclusion, oppression, it is work. We're going around planning and strategizing and preparing and fighting, and it is a lot of work to run this program. But when you're open, when we all move into that space of fearlessness, I don't have to plan anything, it's all here. I don't need to manipulate circumstances, it's just transparent. It's restful. We can come to rest. We no longer need to control and manipulate when we are in that larger operating system, in that heart and mind of Christ. You don't need to control. Don't worry, the birds, what was the birds, the lilies, don't worry about their, right? Don't worry about their food, don't worry about their clothing. Rest. Come find you rest. And finally, when we come into this self-existing dignity, that we all actually are. you have the dignity to take up the space that you're taking up right now with these beautiful bodies. Right now, there is a dignity, a rulership that you can tap into. Not ruling one over the other, you see, because everyone in here is a king or a queen or a genderqueer ruler. So if everyone's a ruler, we're not trying to rule over somebody. You see, this is where it gets confusing for our ordinary mind. Just self-existing dignity, worthiness. Each one of us. Borrowing from my Buddhist tradition, I really love the Buddha has a great definition of conceit. He says conceit, normally we think of conceit as, oh, I'm better than you. That's a pretty easy one. He says actually conceit is threefold. I'm better or superior. I'm worse. I'm inferior, a form of conceit. I'm equal to. It's a hard one for a queer social justice group, right? Bear with me for a moment. It's the whole mindset of comparing where's me? Am I better? Am I worse? Or am I equal? It's all the whole software program of me. And when that's released, there's no worry about better, less, or equal in the kingdom of heaven. Right?
Yeah.
Right? And he really twists our minds by going a step further. He says, really conceit is when those who are superior say, I'm superior. Those who are superior say, I'm inferior. Those who are superior say, I'm equal to. Those who are equal say, I'm superior. Those who are equal say, I'm equal. Those who are equal say, I'm less than. Those who are less than say, I'm superior. Those who are less than say, I'm equal. Those who are less than say, I am less than. Meaning that, maybe someone's better at tennis than me, or, there's some differences in the way that we all operate, and yet if we're hung up on those differences, we're going to get lost. So, and I really like that because it even holds the paradox.
Yeah.
We can still have difference, and yet not be so wrapped up in where do I fit.
Yeah.
Right. This is the conclusion of spiritual sovereignty. But the last point is, and the title of the sermon gets from this point, is that spiritual sovereignty means that we rule with a broken heart. Jesus had a broken heart when he died on the cross. And they say that when they pierced his side and blood came out, water came out. I once heard a wonderful sermon that traced the science, what I couldn't possibly do right now, that said that kind of water around the heart is actually a physiological condition that indicates severe stress, severe strain on the heart. There's a broken heartedness about coming fully into incarnation. You see, when we're totally transparent and we're not hiding, when we're innocent and open to each moment, we're going to get our heart broken. Right? Usually we're hiding because we want to save ourselves the pain of a broken heart. If we can control things, then maybe my heart will be not touched, not broken, not seen. But to show it all is to risk and to actually feel the breaking of the heart. But the good news, the gospel, is that there's something on the other side of that broken heart. You see? When we go all the way through that broken heart, we meet a tenderness, a poignancy, a vitality that is Christ Jesus. It is life-giving to be vulnerable and open. That's where life is in the living. This is a deadened life, closed off. This is life. And yes, it means coming all the way into that broken heart and feeling it fully and feeling what's on the other side of it. And so when we gather in community, I like to think of this not just as a church, but a broken hearts club. Right? Here we can come and we can have our hearts broken open and healed. We can see what's on the other side, to see the light that's coming out, that precious love that's coming out of that broken heart. A love that can't be experienced on any other plane other than in these forms, these bodies, this life. It's a very unique, precious kind of love that the universe knows in no other way. And we are gifted and we are blessed to be able to experience that love through our broken heart. And so I wish for all of us today that we can sit with some dignity in whatever way that you sit, knowing that you are in fact, through your love and openness to Christ consciousness, Jesus Christ, Buddha nature, however you define the divine, your openness to the divine, that you are in fact the gender queer ruler who is called to rule.